in this segment, I want to talk about, I began the program by talking about the vaccine pushers, Fauci, of course, being one of the principal ones, CDC, and Fauci. Fauci is at the NIH, and as his position there at the NIH, he is with infectious diseases, and he's pushing vaccines very heavily, along with very dangerous pharmaceutical drugs. And he's telling everybody, we're going to have the vaccine ready for all of you by December. And of course, they've spent $1.2 billion to make sure that AstraZeneca is going to be making 300 million doses, one for each and every one of you Americans out there, because I'm not taking mine. I guess they figure there's about 30 million of us who are going to fight them over this, at least. So they made 300, not 330 million. But he said, we're going to have them ready by December, and they've already funded it for whatever this vaccine is. The vaccine is still to be determined. And he said, in the meantime, take your flu shot. And so we're going to take a look at what these guys are really all about. There was a story that came out, I mentioned it earlier in the program, Judicial Watch started looking into records based on what the Center for Medical Progress started to uncover. I guess they had a hunch that the end customer was going to be some of these Nazi scientists at the NIH or the FDA or the CDC. And Judicial Watch announced today that it received 165 pages of records from the FDA, showing that the FDA between 2012 and 2018 entered into 8 contracts worth $96,370 with Advanced Bioscience Resources, ABR, to acquire, quote, fresh and never frozen, unquote, tissue from first and second trimester aborted fetuses for use in creating, quote, humanized mice, unquote, for ongoing research. Now, Supreme Court, when they came up with Roe v. Wade, they said, well, we'll leave it up to the states as to whether or not they want to make abortion legal in the second, third trimester, but you can't stop abortion in the first trimester. Nobody can stop it because we say so. Now, in the second trimester, even the Supreme Court understood, even in 1970, that babies can survive born in the second trimester. So they're out there acquiring fetal tissue and we say because so many black babies are aborted. That really was the purpose of Margaret Sanger at the very beginning. She was very clear it was black genocide. Why aren't they caring about these black lives? On the inside, we're all the same. ABR is a nonprofit firm, they say, which has been the subject of criminal referrals from the House and the Senate committees investigating whether Planned Parenthood or any other entity was profiting from the handling of fetal tissue from aborted babies. Federal law regulates the purchase and the acceptance of human fetal tissue for research purposes. It's unlawful to knowingly transfer fetal tissue for profit. So that's why they call them a nonprofit. But of course, you can play that game any number of ways. So what Judicial Watch did, they requested that the FDA give them the information. Of course, the FDA refused. So they had to file a lawsuit. And they refused to respond when they asked them back in September 28th of 2018. That was when this was exposed. And of course, the response of the FDA is to stonewall on information. The response of the government of California is to bring up all kinds of bogus legal charges, as I pointed out earlier in the program. Let's pretend that we're not surveilling anybody and everybody, and we're going to come after them and destroy their lives because they recorded these conversations without the knowledge of these other people, which is something that every investigator does. And it was a crime, what they did. And so if you have reason to believe that somebody is committing a crime, you have a reason to record them without their permission. But let's go on beyond what California is doing. Let's take a look at what the FDA and the criminal organizations in Washington are doing. So they asked for all contracts and related documentation between the FDA and Advanced Biosciences Resources. They asked all about that, how it was related to humanized mice research and so forth, and they've got what they asked them for, and they refused to turn it over. So they sued them. They won the lawsuit, and now they've got the records. The new production of records shows a June 28th, 2017 email exchange with a subject line, FDA RFQ, a request for quotation, between a redacted a redacted FDA contract specialist and an ABR official named Ms. Larton, in which the FDA official tells the ABR official, I'm tasked with the purchase of tissues suitable for HM research. HM is humanized mice. Humanized mice. I would like to request a quote. Please review the statement of work and quote your pricing as outlined. And so they gave him quotes for baby livers, baby thymus, and so forth. And they point out when they define what HM, humanized mice, is. They say HM are created by surgical implantation of human tissue into mice that already have multiple genetic mutations to block the development of the mouse immune system at a very early age so it doesn't reject the human tissue. The absence of the mouse immune system allows the human tissues to grow and develop into functional human tissues. And so they want to make sure that this human tissue, these livers and thymus, are at an age range between 16 and 24 weeks, and tissue must be fresh and never frozen and so forth. This is why I call these people Nazi scientists, but there's even more to this. Over the weekend, and I've been meaning to talk about this the last couple of days, this mouse, a human mouse, Nazi science brought this up. Looking forward to the end of humanity, Wall Street Journal, in praise of transhumanism, essentially. It sounds bitterly ironic now, they say, but in the midst of a global pandemic, but not long ago, some of the most forward-looking people in the world believed that humanity was close to abolishing death. Abolishing death. If you ask me today, is it possible to live to be 500? The answer is yes, said Bill Maris, the founder of Google Ventures in 2015. 3 years later, biomedical researcher Aubrey de Grey estimated that, quote, people in middle age now have a fair chance of never dying. Why? Because of technology, our new God. This has been the lie told to humanity by Satan, who is behind all this, from the very beginning in the Garden of Eden. You will be like God and you will never die. That's the fundamental lie underlying transhumanism. And so they go back and they talk about, well, it started with the Transhumanist Declaration, an 8-point program, first issued in 1998. No, it goes back longer than that. It goes back to the Garden of Eden. But transhumanism was a term coined by Julian Huxley, Aldous Huxley's brother. You know, Aldous Huxley, who came up with Brave New World, who are going to manipulate humans and so forth and create a kind of high-tech slavery, reimagine slavery. I guess that should be the theme of the show today, reimagining slavery. He coined that term in a 1957 essay. But here's the connection to the NIH. The Human Connectome Project. Does that sound familiar? You know, we had the Human Genome Project for a couple of decades. You had Francis Collins who worked on that. And then he left in 2008 and went to the NIH in 2009. And what happened in 2009? They created the Human Connectome Project at the National Institutes of Health. Quote, an ambitious effort to map the neural pathways that underlie human brain function, unquote. These people believe that you are nothing other than matter. And they think that your soul, your essence, is simply ones and zeros that can be observed, manipulated, recorded, transferred, transported. Michio Kaku says, yeah, that's how we get over deep space travel. We just digitize our thoughts and beam our thoughts to a body somewhere else. All right. Not going to get in. Don't have any time for any more of this. But just understand, the people at the core of the transhumanist research and this chimera research with the coronavirus and bats, and all goes back to the NIH, to Fauci. Why are we allowing a Nazi scientist to shut down the globe, to shut down the economy here, to put us in the chains of a reinvented slavery? Oh, well, yeah. It's kind of a rhetorical question, isn't it?
Dyer is an author, comedian, TV presenter known for his deep analysis of Hollywood, geopolitics, and culture. His graduate work focused on psychological warfare and film. He's the author of 2 books, Esoteric Hollywood 1 and 2, and the co-creator and co-host of the television show Hollywood Decoded. He's been featured on numerous popular shows and podcasts. We really appreciate him coming on jaysanalysis.com. While he's still there, Jay Dyer on YouTube. So much to cover, all these big Hollywood people committing suicide, all this pedophilia coming out in the open, what's happening with Trump, the whole world. Thanks for joining us. I know you've got a big audience of folks. We really appreciate your perspective. Where do you want to start first on this Tuesday, June 23rd transmission?
Well, thanks for having me. We can start with what you said when I watched you back in about 2004 or 5. I remember you very pointedly saying, folks, they're going to bring back human sacrifice. The UN, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, they're going, it's Aztecs. So I heard you say back then, and I thought that was a little off, right? I was already kind of conspiracy woke at the time, but I thought, surely not. And you know what I did, Alex? I went and I got at my library about 40, 50 of the elite books, and I went through them all. I plowed through them. And sure enough, you were right. I actually tracked down examples of where global elitists like Arthur Kessler in Ghost of the Machine, he says, you know what? Since everything is natural, anything that occurs is natural. It's all just natural process. All of history includes human sacrifice, cannibalism, these kinds of things. It's all just natural. There's nothing right. So here is one of the top Royal Society type elites literally saying everything that you said. So that's what I did. I went and I launched into all these books. I plowed in because you said that's what you did. And lo and behold, you were right.
Let me tell you, I remember 20 years ago reading official UN documents where they said, we should bring back human sacrifice to lower population, and we should make pedophilia the center of the new family. I'm not the one coming up with this, but these people are crazy. Where do you think it stems from?
Well, ultimately, the battle is spiritual. As you know, it's a cosmic, primal battle between good and evil. Lucifer, the fallen angel. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was just reading in the last few weeks some of the psychonauts. If you're familiar with Terrence McKenna, if you're familiar with Tim Leary, all these guys working at the behest of the CIA to promote the MK Ultra / mind control LSD phenomenon. And one thing they consistently say is that, like you found out when you were, talking to Joe Rogan on that top podcast of all time, you guys were talking about the float tanks and talking to the entities. Well, I tracked down where they talk about that. And John C. Lilly, right, the famous dolphin creeper, right, who had a thing for dolphins. Well, he also worked for the ONI, worked for the CIA in doing signals research and brain chip research back in the 50s. That's why they recruited him. And you know what he says in his autobiography? He says, I went into the tanks and I went and I talked to the aliens and they told me how to come up with all this mind control. That's what he says in his autobiography. So once again, you're proven right on the most popular podcast in history.
But I mean, enough about me. That's the crazy part is we're not the crazy ones. All of big tech is on record. I've even talked to a few of the guys that are big names that aren't part of it. They're like asking, can we defeat it? Because they're like on the fence, should they join it? And they're literally in these meetings, and they know they're talking to aliens. But then the aliens tell them it's genetically imprinted on you.
Yes.
And so it's actually true. It's not just, they're not just giving us the knowledge. It's like we've done it before or something. It's like we're more advanced than them. We're in an embryonic stage. I haven't figured it all out, but this is crazy.
That's what Lilly says. Lilly says that there's two programs in us. He says there's a program from biology that goes back to ancient times, and then there's this other program that they want to install in us to override that, which is the next stage of evolution, which you talked about yesterday, I think, when you were covering the Wall Street Journal piece. That next stage of evolution is seen to be the omega point, which all of these technocrats and all of these what would seem to be counter-establishment figures, these sort of archaic revival. Let's go back to, everybody just laying around in dirt and filth, being hippies, basically. They're actually the same movement. They're all connected. And you need to look no further than Burning Man. They all go to Burning Man, the tech elite. They'd all blow their minds out on acid. And they have initiation rituals at Burning Man. This is all confirmed now.
Where do you think it's going, and how do you think it's going for them?
Unfortunately, they are getting the upper hand. So I just got demonetized the other day on YouTube. So in fact, a year ago when InfoWars was banned across all platforms, at the very same hour that you got banned, I had my entire website deleted. Just no warnings, no nothing, just deleted. Like 10 years of movie analysis, 10 years of research just deleted.
By the way, it's important you say that because they use my banning as a cover for a mass banning.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, well, so it took me a month, thousands of dollars to rebuild everything that I'd done for 10 years. I did have it backed up, but as you know, it's just a nightmare to play, hopscotch. They want you hopping around to all these different things, and you can never build up, right? You have to constantly.
Exactly. You're always spending your time just surviving instead of winning.
Exactly. And that was the technocrat plan long ago. I mean, I remember you mentioned Brzezinski, and I would go and I read Grand Chessboard. I read Between Two Ages. And I think what was amazing about Between Two Ages that Brzezinski says, not only do we have to co-opt society and bring in this technocracy, he even said religion. He said religion needs to be co-opted. We need to steer these churches into becoming basically fake fronts for World Council of Churches, National Council of Churches, all Rockefeller created stuff, all in the Rockefeller's biography. They brag about it, right? Rockefeller has whole chapters on Bilderberg, on all that stuff. So it was all, what blew me away was that it's all in their books. I mean, Brzezinski has a whole section on weather warfare, right? And he wrote that in what, 72, 73?
Let me give you an example. I was talking to a high-level CIA guy just the other day. I'm not bragging about it, it's just a fact. And he was just telling me, and I already knew all this. He's like, yeah, we do maneuvers going back to the 80s with just the military doing a drill. And we would black out the sky with the dishes we have that can create rain. And he goes, yeah, no, it's the local Doppler radar. We really control it. It shows you Doppler, what's really going on, but it's secondary, and its main function is blocking out. But sometimes we got to have jets fly over and spray it, and that way the Chinese and the Russians can't see what our drill is. Now, again, I already know that, but the general public doesn't get, even it's somebody who's like, well, you know, high-level CIA, DARPA, whatever, but the troops all knew they were blocking it out. All the Green Berets out there doing the drill for, you know, grabbing nuclear weapons from the Iranians, they have a drill to raid Iranian nukes. They blocked the sun out for a week. I mean, that was in the 80s and 90s and whatever. We'll come right back with Jay Dyer, jaysanalysis.com, great guy, smart guy. He doesn't need to pay me any more homage. We pay him homage. We pay all you homage. I want to hear where he thinks this is all going on the other side, straight ahead. Stay with us. We got big announcements. Start of the next segment. I mean, big announcements. And Jay Dyer will ride shotgun with us. Jay Dyer has jaysanalysis.com, author, researcher. So get into it. What would you call this period of time we're living in? What are the big topics and issues you want to hit that you want to cover for the listeners and viewers out there? Because to me, this is just a crazy time. I see the left committing seppuku, suicide, going crazy, but then I see all these other forces. What do you think's really behind it all?
Well, you talk about the Trump dimension. It's like we're entering the Manson dimension. You remember what Manson talked about? I mean, helter-skelter, we're going to have Jesus and Lucifer the same side of things. Manson literally said we would have race wars. I'm not saying Manson was a prophet. He was obviously a lunatic, but you know, this blending of opposites, this is all alchemical. That I was talking about Leary before. Leary said that the age of transition, this age that we're entering into, he said it would be an alchemical transition to an omega point, to a singularity, which again, you talked about that in the past. And so, you know, ironically, the last of the global elites books that I got, I've gone through about 45 or 50 of these now, is Klaus from Davos. Guess what? Klaus has an entire chapter on, which, by the way, if you talk about it, you are a lunatic. But Klaus has a whole chapter on geoengineering, right? So here's this book, Fourth Industrial Revolution. This is where they're going. This is where we are now. Great reset. They just talked about this the entire week last week. Great reset time. This is austerity. This is everything the banking elite had planned for 100 years, technocracy. And Klaus says that the Internet of Things, nanotechnology, biotech, it's all going to roll in now. This is the age of transition.
And the new vaccines are not vaccines. They have nanotech that reprogram our cells. They skipped animal trials. It's just here. They're not playing games now. They're just moving on us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, remember Brave New World? We've all heard of this novel. Maybe not as many of us have read it. I recently read it after reading it back in high school. You know, you don't even know what's going on. And what does he say in Brave New World? He says that we can't have Mustafa Mann, the world's socialist controller. He says we can't have the masses reading Shakespeare, watching, you know, good productions. We've got to have this degenerate, toxic culture. And he says we have to keep even the real scientific discoveries from people. This is what he tells John the Savage in the novel, the world's socialist controller. He says we have to do this because the people can't handle it. They don't care. They don't want to know that stuff. So we have to dumb them down and destroy them. So that is a game plan. That is not an expose.
That's
novel.
right. His brother ran the UN. This is he said before he died in '62, this is our battle plan.
Julian, which, as you know, coined the term transhumanism. He wrote UNESCO's philosophy. Go read that 50-page thing. All he says in there is everything that the technocrats say. He says we got to lie about everything about what we're really doing. We got to pretend like we're liberals. We got to kill everybody off. And he says it is eugenics, right? It's not eugenics in the sense of like, well, we're going to pick one master race. He says we're going to pick like Moonraker, like Hugo Jackson Moonraker. We'll pick the top from the different races and to just kill everybody else off. So the breakaway civilization Moonraker plan is real.
That's exactly what my dad was told as a junior in high school with the head of the botany department running a secret eugenics operation. He said, listen, we're not like the Nazis. We're just going to kill all the dumb people. We'll have the smart blacks, the smart whites, the smart Jews, the smart whatever. And I mean, these people really have a plan and they're running things. So how do you think your plan's going?
Well, unfortunately, right now they have rolled out a lot of the technocracy. I mean, if you look at the way the Fortune 100, Fortune 500, they have coordinated efforts that have gone on for the last several years globally. You see things culturally roll out, and the entire corporate establishment across the world promotes it everywhere, right? All the banking, all the elite, they promote the same things. COVID was a great example of this, right? This coronavirus COVID hoax was nothing but a giant psyop. They even wrote articles in the New Scientist saying we're living through the greatest, largest psychological operation in history.
Well, I could ask the questions here, but you're definitely over the target. What do you think they're going to pull next? Because they've pulled a lot of stuff lately. It seems like 2020 is kind of a metaphysical, esoteric year for them. Yeah,
great point. I noticed that the patterns of what we've seen in 2020 tended to be election-based, politics-focused. They're calling for this coup against Trump. But publicly, Biden does it. He's fumbling over his words, stumbling, hardly talk. And then we see the CFR write that article about how it's time for the military to please get rid of this guy, take him out. This definitely needs to happen for justice, right? So we a lot of this is election focused, but a lot of people are focused only on the election. I always try to stay focused on the big picture. And the big picture is to roll out this next phase, this next business plan phase of the technocracy, right? UBI, all of that. I just came across an entire essay by one of the technocrats I know you know about changing images of man. Remember Willis Harman? In 1981, he wrote an essay about how they would have essential and non-essential workers, that you would have to demonstrate your viability and usefulness to the collective to even have work or to have possessions, right? You're not going to have a car. You're not going to have a phone. You're going to have to demonstrate that you need those things for the society, for the collective. You'll be given a purpose, right? And in 1981, he said that UBI social credit system would be rolled out with essential and non-essential workers. It's that crazy.
And that's what Bill Gates is openly doing with his new education. Exactly. Imagine the ultimate racism level, not what color you are, but this elite, foggy computer decides if you're essential or not.
Yeah, remember Tragedy and Hope, a lot of people talk about the later chapter where Quigley goes into the banking elite and the Rockefeller Foundation, all these different groups funding the leftist movements. That's very important, but a lot of people forget right smack in the middle of the book, there is the chapter on the managerial society, the managerial technocracy. And even in that chapter, Quigley, back in the 60s, right, he was basically writing this book exposing the CFR's entire approach to world government. He was at Georgetown. He was Bill Clinton's mentor. This is a key book. It's crucial. I've lectured through all 1,300 pages if people want to go see my lectures. And what he says is that there will be basically AI in cities running everything. You'll live in, just like you've talked about, white box, barren cities of computers running everything. It'll be like living in a Walmart. You're going to live on the aisle of Walmart, right? You're going to live on French fry aisle or something, right? And your neighbors are going to, but you're going to be like just this, glob of a human, this test tube, gub snail man, micro machines.
That constantly
creature.
Has to virtue signal like a chicken or a pigeon pecking the deal to get a piece of grain. It's all just like a Pavlovian ritual where you're in a box going peck, peck, peck.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think what's really mind-blowing is that it's not in one book. It's in every one of their books.
Well, that's right? The thing is they all say the same thing. Like the Wall Street Journal thing saying, dreaming of the end of humans or whatever the headline was. It's the same weird thing. It's unimaginative. It's just like die, roll over, give over your humanity. It's the only way you live. It's the same message. Die. It's alien. It's alien. It's die humans, die humans, die humans, die. It's the same message over and over again.
Yeah, it's the entities that, right? I mean, it's the same spirit behind this, right? Who does Tim Leary say is the father of this era? He says Crowley. He says this in the introduction. He wrote the introduction. He says Aleister Crowley and the talking to all the entities, that is the spirit of our age.
Let's talk about that with Jay Dyer straight ahead, and the pedophilia coming out and the religion of the evil and how we stop it. You've got alchemists, magicians, drug addicts, CIA, Aleister Crowleyites, who believe taking DMT and other drugs, that they're interfacing with these demons that give them these plans. Whether this is some genetic remnant or a real spiritual communication, regardless, scientifically, they're a death cult that's taken over. Your elaboration on that and where you think it's going and how it's going for them and what you think they'll pull next and what they would do if they had control. Because whatever you want to talk about, you're a smart guy. I want to hear from you.
Well, it goes back to Plato, right? So if we look back to Plato's Republic and we look at what the ancient philosophers said, that's actually an elitist manual for how to govern and run society, right? Plato and the Greeks invented this idea, not just of eugenia, of eugenic regimentation, but also the idea of communism, right? The idea of the guardian class, which is at the middle of that Platonic period or pyramid. That guardian class has everything in common, right? And they can pretty much do whatever they want to with the lower proletarian, slave class. And so there's a strict view that everything has to be quantified mathematically and regimented and controlled. That's the origin of technocracy, of quantification. Fast forward all the way up to Malthus and all those characters, the Galtons, the Wedgwoods. You read all those people and they're just saying, look, we need to use this model to govern and control society, right? And so they give everybody these false paradigms, these false worldviews, these overlays that are synthetic, these fake worldviews. Meanwhile, they sit back as this kind of scientific priest class, which, again, Leary, Jose Delgado, they all talk about themselves as the priest class. In fact, I was reading Jonas Salk the other day, the hero that we all think is a hero, right? Did you know Jonas Salk wrote a book called Survival of the Wisest, where he says that the elite priest class have to step up to the table and commandeer evolution. This is what they all say. They say we have to commandeer evolution to control where the species goes, and that will include mass experimentation on the human population, right? He says that, yeah, exactly. And so the survival, the wisest that he's talking about there are the smart ones that Leary talks about, who are the scientific priest class.
And by the way, let's talk about just one little data point that's like the thread on the sweater. Gates gets up in all these speeches and says, if we give an old lady cancer treatment when she's 80, we got to fire 10 teachers. Well, if you know about the economy, the more service you give, the deeper the economy and the more jobs. Once you say someone loses for you to gain, that's not a Renaissance economy. That's a conquest economy. Those actually implode. More service, more love, more altruism builds a better society. But the very liberals that say they want to give free stuff say, kill an old lady, you get 10 jobs. No, you're making yourself worthless too. They've already got robots ready for that. So just the mathematics Gates says of, oh, we kill an old lady. How is killing an old lady connected to hiring teachers? Again, it's all numbers down. Yeah, it's not mathematics. It's just a fraud he puts out.
Yeah, it's just made up, right? Well, we get those numbers down, and then if we have less people, then I'll have more New Balance sneakers that I can wear, and everybody will work.
And he just wants the power to kill. But I mean, that's what I'm saying exactly. He just states things that are never even true. He goes, it's like saying, well, we need the science. Fauci says Americans don't trust science or authority. Well, you lied about everything about COVID. Why would I listen to someone? I go buy a car and they say it's brand new and it burns up on the highway 5 minutes later. I buy another one. It breaks in a week. You're a liar. It's not, quote, I can't handle science. I can't handle psychotic liars.
Yeah, it's a humiliation ritual, right? This is the Maoist element of this, the youth revolution. They would do these humiliation rituals. That's what they're doing here is co-opting Gen Z, make them into this Maoist revolutionary youth brigade, and they're all totally at the behest of the Fortune 100. I mean, imagine thinking that you're fighting the system when the entire corporate establishment is giving hundreds of millions of dollars to what you're doing.
And by the way, go back to that video of Fauci with the guy in the clown outfit, all acting official and male and powerful when they're all just yes men. Go back to that footage. So who's on top of this, Jay?
Well, you have, of course, according to Quigley, the Bank for National Settlements, those powerful banking families and empires at the tip top. And then you've got under them this sort of the way the Anglo-American establishment by Quigley describes it is the society of helpers, right? These are the 6,000, Rothkopf book, the 6,000 managerial class of the
super class
idiots. Yeah, the academic idiots who think that they're into this and that they're going to actually help things. And you know, they buy into the BS, basically. These professors. I mean, I had just the worst experience in college with these professors, right? But they all believe it, right? They believe their own BS. They think that they're going to be part of this elite class and that they're going to fix everything. And they don't realize that, of course, the elite helper class are the first ones to get eliminated, right? In any of these Stalinist type revolutions, right? And it's funny because you read H.G. Wells, you read Bertrand Russell, they all laugh about this. They all talk about it. They're like, well, you know, obviously the traitors to the existing people, that's who we eliminate first, right? Because how can the coming regime, you know, trust the traitors, right? So that's the irony of the whole, like, you know, Soviet.
Yeah, I'm not bragging about this, but I've had the globalists, they haven't tried in like 7, 8 years, literally try to hire me because they know if I joined them, I'd really join them. Like if you joined them, I'm sure you'd actually do it. With their people, they're all backstabbers. Like, what must that be like to be around people always jockeying for a better position? It just sounds like a nightmare. We'll be right back with our guest. Stay with us. We see the collapse of Hollywood. We see all these big producers jumping off. The last few days, 4 or 5 of them committing suicide, others getting arrested for pedophilia. I mean, really, it is collapsing. And they're then launching all their weapons at once: race war, societal collapse, COVID-19. But really, we should be rejoicing because this, I see, is their fault.
A lot of my research on psychological warfare in Hollywood, and I didn't realize how much of a close connection there was between those two. I'd heard these rumors for many, many years of, oh, Ian Fleming, you know, he worked with Office of Naval, or the British Royal Navy. He was a PSYOPs, this guy, and all this. So I went and did my master's on that, and come to find out, pretty much everything that you see in, say, the Bond stories is, I mean, it's Hollywooded up, but it's kind of true. There's elements of truth there. We mentioned Moonraker before. But a lot of these other operations were from Ian Fleming's own experiences. He saw this stuff, right? And so, yeah, I think that that's one of the key ways to understand the close connection between Hollywood and the intelligence agencies for many, many years. There's liaison offices, right? We all know this, but it's much deeper than we think. And now that Epstein has come out, now that we, you know, can reflect on what Kubrick said, for example, in Eyes Wide Shut, we realize that that was all real, right? The Eyes Wide Shut stuff wasn't, you know, some
oh, by the way,
theory.
Again, I'm not bragging about this. I met for like 3 days with his daughter. She was on record to be his main protege, the only one he trusted. She laid out, she said, no, this is all real.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Kubrick has this theme of the pedo cults and all this stuff through most of his films, right? You go back to Lolita, go back to The Shining, where, you know, Danny has been essentially molested by the Jack Nicholson character, right? I mean, this is a theme throughout Kubrick. I think he was always trying to tell us that this is how the elite entrap people. This is how they get blackmailed. This is what they do. This is how the whole system works. It's a giant blackmail scam operation. And many books have come out actually vindicating that. Former madams, right, used to have the DC madam on, right? So you knew about this a long time ago. Now it's all just out in the open. It's clear for everybody. Externalization of the hierarchy. Everybody can look and see what's going on.
So what do you expect them to do next, and how do you think it's going for them?
Well, it's going to depend on what happens election-wise. I think we're going to have to wait and see whether they can destroy the election happening, right? Destroy the possibility of that. That's what all this stuff is in the immediate intended to do, right? Is to get people to not vote, to get people to not look at what Trump's doing, to have this coup, to do whatever they can that's necessary, right? It could get really crazy. I expect it to in the next few months. But I would say that even after that, the election time, they're going to continue with the same
nothing lets up. In fact, let's talk about that. If Trump loses, obviously, Biden is a placeholder. Who are they planning to insert?
I think you were right that it's going to be a Hillary Obama thing somehow, right? That's got to be in the cards. Who else could they have, right? There's no other candidates or people that could even marshal enough support. I mean, I think Trump is still really popular. So they have to find these kind of placeholders, like you said. So I think that if that happens, it'll further agitate the opposition.
Exactly. No one wants to actually go up against Trump. The secret is a real personality. He'll flamethrow him. But if you put a zombie up, Trump doesn't know how to deal with a zombie. He even says it. So it's very sophisticated alchemical rituals they're doing.
Absolutely. Again, the alchemy is always mentioned. Again, whether it's Arthur Kessler, whether it's Fritjof Capra, whether any of these global elite, they will actually talk about alchemy in their books.
Yeah, Trump will rise against a real challenger. But if you're a gladiator, you enter the arena, there's a corpse. He's like, the public's like, where's the fight? Because he's fighting a corpse. People think Biden's weakness is strength. No, folks. it's beyond strength. It's victory for them.
He's like a Muppet character from with a robot Muppet character who like has a virus or something and he fumbles the words. Or I don't know, but
I've gone and watched random live feeds. He can't string one sentence together.
Did you see his YouTube ad? I mean, he fumbles in the YouTube ad. He's just
I saw it this morning. He's like, I really need your help, guy. He said Trump bad. He said, I saw the black kids. They were cockroaches. I mean, it's like, what?
Yeah, I mean, this is the irony is that this class, this political class, they are intensely racially minded, right? They continue this whole racial attitude, and so they want to actually damage the population as a whole, especially the black population. And so,
well, that's it, because they're the elitists, so they have to like have a group they enslave. That's why they love homeless and all that. It's like to them to see a bunch of people in bad, to see us with swimming pools and jet airplanes and let me tell you, the elitists hate going to a club and seeing commoners with hot wives, hot husbands. They just genuinely are pissed by success.
Yeah, I mean, who could have guessed that what they would bring is the religion of we was Canes, right? I don't know if you know about this whole, but the whole black Hebrew Israelite, all this cult. It's a cult. It's a crazy cult, just like the CIA and other groups have studied for years through ethnography, cults, indigenous religions. How do we tailor these fake religions to roll out new cults to bring?
Well, get into what you just mentioned, because there's all sorts of weird Sabbatans and weird cults in the Vatican and weird. There's cults everywhere. So what were you getting at?
Just that these are perfect mechanisms for social engineering and for bringing in new plans or new. I mean, experimenting. There's a lot of different uses for cults, but I mean, why do you think Hollywood is so full of cults, right? Kabbalistic cults, New Age cults. I mean, Hollywood is just one big cult, basically, right? I mean, so they're test labs, and the CIA has studied this for years, right? It's called ethnography. They would actually bring in anthropologists undercover. Did you know, by the way, Indiana Jones? I was watching your funny clip about you as Indiana Jones. In the script, Indiana Jones is said to be part of the OSS. He's actually an OSS operative. He's an undercover anthropologist. And so the CIA actually did that, right? They would take these anthropologists and they would go and they would study cultures in order to figure out every little node, every weak point, every tension point, and exacerbate that. That's exactly what they're doing in the U.S.
Oh, that's exactly what the race war is.
Exactly.
They admit that. I mean, that's in the WikiLeaks that Hillary's talking to the head of a university psychological, and she goes, what do we do? He goes, more culture war. And that's all this is.
Yeah, welcome to the Manson dimension. Exactly.
No, I agree with you. That's very profound what you said, because Manson worked for the CIA. It's come out he was putting out drugs for a mind control operation. That's been confirmed. He wasn't in the CIA, but he worked for him, and they burned him, but he was a beta test of a race war they were looking at then, and now they're looking at it now.
Yeah, so they'll run these models and these tests. And so what we're looking at now, it's almost like a combination of color revolution, NED, open society funded stuff, mixed with the Manson experiment test tube thing, mixed with black, we was Kangs, Black Lives Matter, Hebrew Israelites. So they're rolling out all this stuff at once, because all of those things, in my view, even Jonestown, I think you could look at Jonestown as another example of this. Jonestown is a similar pattern of.
Oh, that was CIA, admittedly.
Yep, exactly.
It's declassified. That was a test. So instead of just turning humanity loose and going, because people just want victory. They want competitiveness. They want men and women. They want families. I mean, the truth is we just want normalcy. They're injecting a virus constantly trying to sabotage that. The truth is we just come together without them. They're there to create the division.
Absolutely. You exacerbate any tension areas, right? Blow it up into something that's not even really a problem, right? You look at the statistics, but that's the model of how you do the balkanization, right? I mean, the arc of crisis model, for example, Brzezinski, what he did was in the former Soviet bloc, he just exacerbated any possible tensions in the former Soviet bloc, and that helped defeat, the remaining Soviet satellites in the Cold War. That technology of micronations, balkanization, I think is what they're rolling out. So I think that in the long term, they'd actually like to balkanize the U.S. and split it up into who knows what.
Exactly. They admit world government isn't about unification. It's about balkanization. Well, Jay, I've seen your work before. I'm really impressed with you coming on this today. Please join us again very, very soon. jaysanalysis.com. Thank you so much for
Thank you
for spending time with us. You got 30 seconds. What else you want to say?
Yeah, I would just say if people want to research my work, you can go to my website and you can get signed copies of the books there. I have basically an entire archive of lecture courses. So I offer what I call a graduate course in geopolitics and the elite writings for $60 a year. I mean, basically, you're paying $5, right? For
no, it's wonderful. People should pay to build an infrastructure. People should, or they'll pay dearly for not supporting. All right, Jay Dyer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you again soon. Paul Joseph Watson's coming up. I've got some key announcements straight ahead. Stay with us on this June 23rd Tuesday transmission.